That was weird. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Collector's Vault. My name is Mike. Today, I kind of just want to talk about something that's not really like a collectible, but I guess in my opinion, it can be considered as a collectible. We're going to be talking about Samus right here in the Metroid series. Now, I want to talk about it because there have been some rumors surfacing recently about new Metroid games, and I have a lot of opinions upon that. Whether I don't want them being remakes, I would rather have these be like the next game in the Metroid series, like the next game in the story chronologically. And so I just felt like this is a topic that I really want to talk about. So, if you guys aren't Metroid fans, I hope you learn a lot today. I'll have to give a spoiler warning, and for those of you who are Metroid fans, I hope you enjoy this topic. So, let's get into it. Let me just start by saying that when I mean Metroid 5, I am not talking about Metroid Prime 5. I remember when Prime 4 was revealed back in E3 2017, and all the YouTuber reactions that I saw were people saying, "Oh my god, Metroid 4, they're making Metroid 4, and not Metroid Prime 4, and it kind of got under my skin because it made me think that these folks weren't true fans and didn't know that Metroid Fusion existed. Metroid Fusion is Metroid 4, people. It says it in the opening cinematic. But that's out of the way, so let's get into the meat of this discussion. So for those of you who are not Metroid fans, I have to give a spoiler warning for the Metroid storyline that I will be discussing. And for those of you who are Metroid fans, and I still have to give a spoiler warning to, shame on you. Shame. Just total shame, because how can you call yourself a Metroid fan if you haven't even played games like Metroid Fusion? But anyway, as we all should know, Metroid 4, aka Metroid Fusion, is the last game in the Metroid timeline. Despite being released alongside Metroid Prime back in 2002, this game happens last chronologically. After the events of Fusion, we now know of the X-Parasites and how they were initially the most dangerous species to exist in the galaxy, perhaps the whole universe. We learn that the Metroids were actually creations of the ancient Chozo race, given the name Metroid, which means ultimate warrior in their language, and designed to become the new predator of the X-Parasites. We also learned that Samus returns in the Chozo memories that the Metroids were tameable or at least controlled by the Chozo. It's still unclear of what caused the Metroids to turn on their Chozo masters after they began transforming into their mutated stages, although it does seem apparent that these are just, as I said, mutations. Possibly they are stages of the Metroid life cycle that the Chozo could not predict and never anticipated, and that's why they turned on them. When the Fusion story was beginning, we learned that the X-Parasites have grown in massive numbers, and were able to flourish on the planet of SR-388, now that the Metroids were eliminated by Samus back in Metroid 2 Return of Samus / Samus Returns. After Samus was able to complete her mission on the BSL station and supposedly destroyed not only the space station, but also the X-Parasites on the planet SR-388, we don't really know where the story can go from here. And this is where creativity will have to come into play. After Fusion, Nintendo was happy to create new stories to fit in between the other Metroid games. I mean, the whole Prime series takes place between Metroid 1 and Metroid 2, and this will include Metroid Prime 4 most likely when that releases. And Other M is after Super Metroid, but before Metroid Fusion. And then we have the remakes. While they are great in their own rights, they don't really offer anything new to the story except for some backstory. And now backstory is always something that I can appreciate. Backstory can fill in gaps and help explain things that just simply need to be explained. It can also be enriching to offer more details or characters or events in the timeline itself. And we also have the spin-off games, like Prime Hunters and Prime Federation Force, which are also more games that take place between Metroid Prime 1 and 2. And now, we have to ask ourselves, why is Nintendo afraid of Metroid 5? Why do they not continue with the next game in the story? Series like The Legend of Zelda is in a category of its own when it comes to, the chronological order of its games and their releases. But Metroid has something going for it. We had 4 games released over the course of 15 years, mind you, but it told the story of Samus' first mission and how she was introduced to the baby Metroid, and then the aftermath. And then in 2002, we had the Prime series introduced to us, which did tell a story as a prequel to Metroid 2, or I guess the Metroid Prime series was they were more like in-between quels of the Metroid story. 17 years later, and we still don't have the next game to show us what happens next. Now that the Metroids are truly extinct and the X-Parasite threat is no more, what now? What new adventure could Samus possibly go on? It's possible that Nintendo is at that point where they feel it's better to just keep diving into the Metroid timeline and fabricate these smaller plot points and other subplots, which can help shape the Metroid story and the Metroid universe that we all know and love, while also telling us these new stories like in Other M and the soon-to-be-released Prime 4. Star Wars has been doing something very similar, where they're, launching movies and TV shows that don't exactly add on to the Star Wars timeline, but they delve in between the existing films. But Metroid has been in a bit of a doldrum of further pushing the narrative of their story, and I think right now this is the time to make that move. Now recently, some Metroid rumors have surfaced about new Metroid games releasing for the Nintendo Switch. And the sources seem to point to the mythical Metroid Prime Trilogy HD, which in my opinion is still very, very welcome, and I'm so surprised that we haven't received this yet. And it should have been released, I believe, earlier this year, alongside the delay of Metroid Prime 4. I believe it was foolish for them not to do it because not only would it have softened the blow of the disappointing news, but it would also give us something to play in the meantime as we wait for Prime 4. The other game being rumored is a Super Metroid remake. And I truly do not think that I'm going to be the first to say this, but Super Metroid does not need a remake. I do believe that the game has many archaic flaws that are due to the era that it was released and the limitations of the Super Nintendo itself. And these limitations these flaws could be corrected in a reboot or a remake. But I also believe that the game is a masterpiece for many reasons, mainly because of all the breakthroughs and the additions and the scope of the game, and how it defined the standard of an amazing Metroidvania game before the genre was even a real thing at that time. But I do not believe that the game needs a remake. The game is already immortal and is regarded as one of the greatest video games of all time, of all games ever created, and currently does not need to be brought into the 9th generation of gaming, nor does it need to be reimagined. Metroid Zero Mission and Samus Returns both were beautiful recreations of these games that were not only archaic, but in many gamers' eyes, they were forgotten. Their remakes made these games more accessible to modern gamers while fixing the problems that they had for the era that they were created. It seems Super Nintendo games tend to age very well and are in the golden years of video games. They are usually hailed for being masterpieces. If anything, I think Metroid Fusion could use a remake before Super Metroid, despite being a more well-made game, in my opinion. But I digress. The point is, I really hope we are not getting more remakes. The Prime Trilogy is perfectly acceptable because it would be perfect to hold us over until the release of Prime 4, and it'll help give newcomers to the franchise a way to play the games so they will be ready for when the new entry comes to us. But we just had Samus Returns come out 2 years ago, with no Metroid games since. And although I love that game, I really don't want another remake as the next game to look forward to. Like, why not make a new 2D Metroid game? Even though it might be another in-between pull, I was praying for another 2D Metroid to play on the 3DS, but even more for the Nintendo Switch. Can you imagine a game similar in scope to Samus Returns, but on a more powerful system? Samus Returns had incredible backgrounds full of moving creatures, landscapes, waterfalls, machines, etc. Now picture those visuals but in 1080p and at 60 FPS, it would look gorgeous. Mercury Steam worked on Samus Returns, and I would say countless prayers for them to be given the chance to work on the next Metroid title or on just another Metroid title, and to make a new 2D Metroid game on the Switch. More importantly, I don't want it to be another remake though. Admittedly, if Mercury Steam were to work on the Super Metroid remake, you can bet your butt that I'll be looking forward to playing it. But I feel they would be limiting their creativity and their talents to the boundaries that is the source material. Samus Returns was amazing, but it couldn't really venture too far when it came to the world that they was building, because, it basically had to fall within the same realm of Metroid 2. If they had a chance to work on a brand new game, then the sky would be the limit. So what of Metroid 5? Although these are all just rumors, it surprises me that even the rumors are not about Metroid 5, like the next game to come after Fusion. Maybe it's because these rumor creators know that Metroid 5 is basically a rumor that's too good to be true and no one will believe it. Maybe they feel that their 4chan post will only get noticed if they mention something like a Super Metroid remake. I don't see it. Metroid 5 is something that true Metroid fans really want. We want to know what happens next. I mean, it's been 17 years since the last game in the timeline. It's going to be even more when the game does ever get revealed. And I mean, I don't think it can be as hard to come up with a new story. I'll admit that after Fusion, we are to believe that the only Metroid left in existence is, well, Samus. You know, just because she has Metroid DNA. But due to this, I'm pretty sure that they could bring the concept of the Metroid species back into the world. Maybe Samus gets captured by the Galactic Federation and they want to use her DNA to clone Metroids again, so that way they are no longer extinct, use them as a bioweapon. But the problem with that is that I'm getting a little sick and tired of the whole secret Metroid breeding program plot that we keep getting. One of the biggest flaws, in my opinion, for Other M story is that it's just too similar to Metroid Fusion story. The Galactic Federation was secretly working on a Metroid breeding program for their military purposes, just like how the Space Pirates were. And then, you know, we were then told the story of Other M, which takes place directly before Fusion, on a man-made research ship, just like in Fusion, about another secret breeding program. And I'll be pretty bummed if this happens again in the next Metroid game. So here's my idea for the Metroid Prime story. And I swear, if this actually happens, I want my share of the profit, Nintendo. Hear me now, okay? So, Metroid Fusion just happened. The X-Parasites are gone, and Samus is the only quote-unquote Metroid left. So what if the new threat was somewhat just the Space Pirates again? I know it might seem unoriginal, given that the Space Pirates are in most of the Metroid games, but what if they have, you know, they rebuilt their forces and they're taking revenge on the Federation and Samus? Maybe that they are aware that Samus is the last living thing that has Metroid DNA, so they want her blood so that way they can create new Metroid clones for bioweapons. And before anyone says that that is unoriginal, just hear me out because I'm not done yet. Let's say Samus does have an end goal that isn't just to defeat the Space Pirates again for the 80th time. What if Samus has learned that not all the Chozo were gone? A small faction of them were not wiped out when Mother Brain went rogue and pulled a Skynet from Terminator, and Samus wants to find them. Samus, of all characters in this universe, has personal reasons for wanting to see them. They are basically her family. And what if they are able to maybe remove the Metroid DNA from inside her, the cleanser, so that way the pirates don't have to pursue her anymore? If there is one thing I loved about the Metroid games, is that many of them have Samus. She's not always in constant communication with the Federation or an ally. Some games definitely stray from this, such as Metroid Fusion with the computer Adam giving you commands. Other M has Samus talking to human Adam before he died, and literally alongside other fellow soldiers. And Prime 3 has Samus always being bothered by the annoying Aurora unit, which you can't turn off, by the way, and being able to communicate with humans on Norian if you ever want to go back to there and talk to them. But I want Metroid 5 to go back to its roots. Similar to how Breath of the Wild took the original style of the very first Zelda game and gave it a modern playstyle, I want Metroid 5 to be an immersive 2D side-scroller shooter with Samus exploring an alien world all by herself, having to dig deeper into the mystery on the planet while defending herself against the local wildlife that will attack her. And this is where I'll say that my Chozo idea will actually work. What if there was a planet that the Chozo remnant are currently in hibernation on? We saw something similar in Prime 2 with the Luminoth, all in hibernation waiting for the threat of the Ing to pass. So we could have Samus traveling to a new planet that is unknown to the Galactic Federation, with the Space Pirates pursuing Samus throughout the planet. Maybe they beat Samus to the planet and they already have an established base, which would give us sections of the game where Samus can infiltrate that base. And the finale of the game could have Samus reaching the inner sanctum of the planet where the Chozo are believed to be resting, and Samus will have to take on the new leader of the Space Pirates. And if that were to happen, I would really hope they don't do something silly like having it be Ridley's brother or something. But this will give us Samus exploring an alien planet full of Chozo relics, which could serve as the upgrades for Samus' suit and for the game's well, the game's progression, basically, and it will give us the space pirates without having them being jammed into the story just for the heck of having them in the story. And it will be a plausible story that won't require Metroids to be, directly involved in the plot. Maybe there can be some Metroids also in hibernation on this planet with their Chozo masters, and the space pirates are able to locate where they're being stored initially, and maybe that's how they can get access to them. I mean, I can go on and on for all the possibilities of, of there being like a practical way for Metroids to be back into this story. And I know at this point I'm starting to gush, but like I said, I think something along those lines would really be cool and be exactly what a new, fresh Metroid game could bring to the table.